Please tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yes, okay, well, as you well know, my name is Peter Haddon. I live here in the UK. My background is, I was born here in the UK, but moved to Africa at a very early age. My dad fell in love with Africa during the war. He was a bomber pilot, did all his training there. So we moved out straight after the war finished, and I was 7 at the time. And he wanted to get a job in aviation and couldn't find one in South Africa, so we moved up to what was then Northern Rhodesia. He could get a job there as an air traffic controller. And so I spent all of my youth in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. And I joined the Rhodesian Air Force from there. That was my first sort of foray into the business world, if you like. And learned quite a bit from my Air Force days. I suppose, because of my youth upbringing in Rhodesia, my dad used to feed me positive thinking books. You know, I mean, I think the only novels I read were Wilbur Smith ones, because they were Africa oriented anyway, which was quite useful to read those novels. But by and large, I was reading Think and Grow Rich and, you know, Psycho-Cybernetics. Dale Carnegie courses, I went on those to start with, and I guess that had an effect on my mindset at the time, because it created this kind of belief that if you apply your mind correctly, you can achieve more or less what you desire. And so that was, I suppose, that seed was sown at an early stage, and then that led to quite a lot of my successes in the Air Force. I was the youngest ever wing commander in the Rhodesian Air Force. I captained Rhodesia at soccer in the World Cup, and I wasn't a great footballing exponent of football anyway, but I was able to get people around me, if you like, to make up for my deficiencies. So that was quite helpful, and knowing that there was a means of getting there. You know, I didn't have to be, say, a Lionel Messi to get into the Rhodesian side. And I think the fact that I was a good example from a coaching point of view, I always used to lead the training, and people used to, struggle to keep up with me, that sort of thing. So I knew what my strengths were at that time and could apply them to best ability. I wasn't the greatest footballer at all, but I was able to use what I did have to actually get me to where I wanted to go. And I think that sort of, I suppose, led me to believe that I can help other people as well, because in being the captain of the Rhodesian side, and I was all the way through, I was captain of my Air Force side, I was captain of the provincial side, then I was captain of the Rhodesian side, and then when it became the World Cup, then I was captain there as well. So I realized that I had, if you like, leadership ability. In the Air Force, I won the Sword of Honor. I came over here to do my training, and I was up against all the Commonwealth Air Forces and Army personnel, and I won the Sword of Honor there. Now, I'm saying this not to brag, but to give you some indication of the mindset. You know, I really believe that if you put your mind to doing something, that you can achieve this. And so I then started to analyze that, and that also, it gave me a greater thirst, I suppose, for positive thinking books. And so I got into, as I've already mentioned, Napoleon Hill and Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics, books like that, the Dale Carnegie ones, Anthony Robbins. I went over to San Diego, did his course there, and that was my initial sort of awakening to the firewalk. Now that had a big influence on me, as far as not just the fact that, if you got into the right state, you could walk across a bed of coals, which would otherwise burn your skin off, but the fact that the power of your beliefs, if you had control over, if you could control your state at that time for that duration. And I then started doing the firewalks in South Africa as part of, my motivational. I ran a magazine in South Africa called Motivation, and so I was interviewed. I had a liaison with Gary Player. He wrote the foreword to my book, and we appeared on quite a number of TV programs together. So, and he, if you like, was a symbol of the power of visualization. And when you kind of put this together, when you've seen in action and proved it to yourself the power of your beliefs, and how if you get your mind around these beliefs, And then you can start visualizing your goals achieved and correlate those. If I get the right beliefs for those goals, my goodness, I've got the formula now. Which is the trouble with the majority of people. You know, they have all the potential to succeed, and they may even have gone to the extent of establishing very clear and meaningful goals and developed a plan of action. But at some level of consciousness, if their beliefs are out of kilter with their desires, and in many cases those are subconscious, you know, the beliefs are at a subconscious level, so they don't actually know that they're carrying around with them beliefs that are not consistent with their desired goals. So part of the coaching that I do now is along those lines, is to get people to see the connection between their subconscious beliefs and their consciously desired goals.
Yeah.
Because without that, you know, we can have all the strategies and tactics in the world which would otherwise work. But if those beliefs are in place, then it has an impact on the self-image. That determines the ceiling, the level that you will actually get to.
Yeah.
So this is a long-winded way of giving you a bit of background
Yeah.
but that's how I came into the coaching, was through my business. I had 2 insurance companies. We turned one around very quickly, and then I sold them for profit each time. And within the insurance companies, all I was doing really was motivating people. I was coaching people at that stage. So if you like, getting results through other people was kind of inherent to whatever I was doing, whether it was in the Air Force or later in business. I had a stint of 6.5 years as managing director of the Rolex watch company in South Africa. And again, what we did there, or what I did there, if you like, is I went around. When I started, we had 57 outlets. When I finished, when I left Rolex, which was 6.5 years later, we had reduced that number to 23, but increased the sales by 15 times, and the profitability as well. And purely through motivating the dealers,
Yeah.
you know, and obviously giving them, the reason we reduced the numbers was because there was quite a bit of discounting going on. We wanted to iron that out, and Rolex should be perceived as the sort of ultimate watch that people aspire towards, so there shouldn't be any discounting at all. But as a quid pro quo, we would say, okay, we will give you exclusivity in this area, providing you take a full range. Oh, they didn't want to do that necessarily, because they didn't think that some of these would sell. I mean, some of them would take, you know, the Rolex range is huge, but some of them were having, you know, 5, 7, 10 watches maybe at most, and we wanted them to stock about 37 to 50. And their objection was that these won't sell. And my question was, why won't they? Well, they've never sold, we've never, right, you've never had them in stock. I'm suggesting if you hold them, the more you hold, the more you'll sell. Well, psychologically, that didn't seem to go down too well, and they said, no, we don't have the investment to do that. So I said, look, you do have the investment if you look for it, if you realize that this is there's a good return on this investment. Take the range. If whatever you haven't sold after 6 months, I will exchange for you for the ones that you have sold. But I want to be involved in your sales team training, because I believe that they will sell. Not one of them came back and asked for refunds. And it's purely not because, I mean, the watches, of course, were great, still are great, but it was more the confidence in their ability to pass these on, to you know, have a relationship with their clients whereby they were able to sell whatever they thought the client should have. So that was the basic background. I've been doing coaching now for the best part of 31 years. And I suppose since, well, positive psychology came on the map, I suppose about 98. I came back to the UK in 97. And when positive psychology came out, I mean, Martin Seligman's book, I learned optimism and then authentic happiness, and you know. So I was aware of what Martin was doing, and I quite liked that concept. And inadvertently, I had been following that anyway. It was always with a positive view. I had always really focused on an individual's strengths. You know, I realized from my own experience that I didn't necessarily have natural talents, but I had seemingly qualities or strengths that I could develop, which would help me to get to where I wanted to go. So I knew that if I did that with myself, I could do that with other people, and that's what I had done in the Air Force, and I had done that with Rolex, and the two insurance companies that we sold. Basically, it was getting results through others as well. All I was doing there was coaching senior people who were then coaching others, down the line. So I suppose I've been coaching for longer than the 31 years, if you want to count those as well. But that's how I got into positive psychology in a bigger way, because it was now being kind of formulated, and it made absolute sense to me. Marty Seligman, when he first came out with this, I kind of wondered why no one had actually thought of that before, because here we had psychology, who in Marty Seligman's eyes had let itself down, in the sense that it had been largely focused on the sort of pathological aspects. And psychologists, by and large, were looking for what was wrong with people and fixing it, rather than looking for what was right with people and strengthening that. And it seems such a logical jump for him to say, well, haven't we missed a trick here? Shouldn't we be focusing more on what we know works from a pathological point of view? Can we not use those, but in terms of focusing on strengths and helping people to develop those strengths and move on that way? So I bought into that, because I felt that was natural. I had affinity with that from the word go.
Yeah.
So is that enough background? That's how I got into this. Yeah. Okay.
And presently, where do you live and work?
Well, I work largely in London, but I travel quite a bit. I have contracts in South Africa, in Ireland, in Switzerland. I'm dealing with UEFA directors in Switzerland at the moment. As we speak, I have the largest motor franchise, the General Motors franchise in South Africa, the Key Group. I have a 2-year contract with them, and that's quite extensive, in the sense that I'm doing one-to-one coaching with their top executive directors. I'm doing group coaching with their divisional directors, and I'm running workshops and seminars for their management supervisors. So yeah, it involves quite a bit of travel, but it's enjoyable, because the variety is there.
Yeah.
And everyone is different, and so whatever I'm doing, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 individuals per day. And that can be quite intensive, because my sessions are 2 hours of coaching, but that also doesn't, you've got probably at least 1 hour before that and at least an hour after it in preparation and follow-up. So each coaching session is probably about 4 hours. If you add in the sort of traveling time as well, it becomes quite a long day when you've got 3 clients. So these days I'm trying to confine it to a maximum of 2.
Yeah.
And I'm doing much more group coaching these days as well, which is quite enjoyable, because it's a one-to-many aspect, and from a financial model, it's better than the one-to-ones. Perhaps not as enjoyable as the one-to-ones, because I think with one-to-ones, you can go so much deeper.
Yeah.
Once you've built that trust relationship, I think people are very open then, when they trust you, and that's when you can get to the real motivations, behind it, and that's when I think they're more open to understanding my success process.
Yeah.
Because I have, basically my coaching program involves 2 simple things. I say 2 simple things, they go quite deep, but simple in the sense that one is a personal development program, and the other is a business growth plan. And I really believe that the business growth plan, you can give people the latest strategies, the techniques, tactics, call it what you will, unless the personal development program is in place, they won't apply that. There's a limit to what they believe about themselves. And in fact, there's 2 core beliefs, I believe, associated with your personal development program. One is related to your self-efficacy, if you like, which is basically how confident are you in dealing with life's challenges as they arise. Do you have confidence that you will find a solution to whatever gets thrown at you in life? That's number 1. Number 2 is, whilst you might have that confidence in your ability to accept the challenges, you might not feel worthy of that level of success. For whatever reason, past conditioning perhaps, you may feel, do I deserve that level of success when there are all these, starving Biafrans or Ethiopians, and look at the problem there now. Is it right for me to be this successful when? So things like that will actually create a ceiling on your limitations.
Yeah.
So if we understand, if I can get clients to understand up front, and we do this on the no obligation meeting, we have a no obligation meeting up front, and get them to understand that for us to work together, you're going to need to realize we're going to be looking at your personal development program in a big way, pretty deep. And I have a 6-stage success process, as I call it. And that basically starts with your thinking. I have a 6-stage success. Do you want to know?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. Very simple in concept. And in fact, I wish this was taught in schools because I believe that it should be.
Yeah.
I think we're doing an injustice to our education system, really, by not giving kids the confidence, the beliefs in themselves. They may have the theoretical knowledge, but they don't really have the confidence to apply it when they go out. And if they were taught this success process, they would be well equipped to do that.
Yeah.
And the success process is very simple. It starts with your thinking. As you may have seen on my emails on my strapline, I've got everything in life as cause and effect, and the key to success is to focus on cause. So it starts with our thinking. Thinking is the initiating cause. Now, I'm not telling you anything revelationary here. I mean, down the ages, we've known that, all the philosophers down the years, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, they all said the same thing. The religious leaders, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, they've all said the same things. The Bible says, as a man thinketh, so he becomes. And I think Earl Nightingale, I don't know whether you're aware of Earl Nightingale, but he was seen as the father of motivation in America. And he had a long-running, 15 minutes a day, I think it was, program on the Voice of America, all about motivation and how to think like a winner. And he put it quite succinctly, I feel, when he said, we become the product of our dominant thinking. And I think that's true. I think that if people can take charge of that thinking process, and that's where many of the difficulties with people begin, because we think,
Yeah.
but we don't really think the right way. And when I talk about thinking, I mean the sort of emotional connection. You and I both know that the majority of books on self-improvement, the majority of courses on self-improvement, and you might find this strange coming from someone who's in the business, but 97% of them do not work. 97% of the books don't work, 97% of the courses and seminars do not work if we're looking at meaningful results. Now, why is that? I think intellectually people get it. They read the book, they know what to do, they know how to do it, great. They go to a seminar, I know what to do, I know how to do it, wonderful. But do they do it? Only 3%, generally speaking, follow through and change their basic habits.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's a lot that comes in. We coach our clients to actually understand that process and the power of spaced repetition and acquiring success habits over a 21-day period. And the first habit that we encourage our clients to develop is this habit of thinking, and thinking in a positive sense, which is where positive psychology has a big impact. We're getting people to think, but in terms of pictures and feelings. And again, this is where an explanation of the conscious and the subconscious mind would come into the mix, because we're saying that, and especially if you take the findings of Dr. Bruce Lipton, he's a cell biologist who's done, he's well respected in the neuroscience world now. He says a lot of things that perhaps maybe the pharmaceutical industry wouldn't enjoy, because he's basically saying that 70% of all illnesses are cured through the mind. And so we don't actually need all of these drugs around, and that's not what the pharmaceutical industry necessarily want us to hear. But he's done quite a bit of research into the conscious and the subconscious mind. And I mean, for people who want to know more about it, I would recommend strongly that they read his book, The Biology of Beliefs, or Google. I mean, there was, and I don't know whether it still is up there, but there was a good interview that Dr. Wayne Dyer conducted with Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he talks in that interview a lot about the conscious and the subconscious mind. And basically what he's found is that it's incorrect to suggest that we have a genetic, if you like, our DNA mix dictates our life thereafter. We're locked into a pattern which is dictated by our genes. And he proved that in the sense that, without going into too much detail, he took the same identical genes but exposed them to 3 different environments. And one became bone, one became muscle, one became fat. Exactly the same genes. So he had scientific proof now that the environment could manipulate our genetic disposition. So whilst he agrees that, of course, our parents and going back beyond that, our grandparents, the genes that they had, we will have inherited a lot of those. So there may be a predisposition to certain behaviors, but it isn't, as people think, solely that's our code and we're locked into that. He felt that we can do an awful lot about changing that. And so if we understand how genes are susceptible to manipulation by the environment, we can use that ourselves to change our beliefs. Yeah. And then he goes on to talk a lot about the subconscious mind being 500,000 times more powerful than the conscious mind at processing information. He uses quite a nice analogy. He talks about the old tape recorders. These days I suppose we'd be talking about CD players now, but he refers to the old tape recorder and says, you can shout and scream as long as you like it, that tape recorder, but as long as it's got that tape in there, it's going to play whatever's on that tape. So our job is either to change the tape or to rewrite whatever is on that tape. And he says we can do just that with our belief system. Our mind, our subconscious mind, is very much like that tape recorder. And 98% or up to 98% of our behavior is dictated by our subconscious mind. Yeah. So if we put those two together and we realize that, gosh, all of our conditioning in the past has led to this program that the subconscious mind, I call it SAM, our subconscious activating mechanism. Yeah. That's what I'd like to get through in the schools. I'd like them to be educated in, we all have a SAM, if you like, which is our slave. Whether you regard Sam as being male or female is irrelevant, but regard Sam as your slave, your servant, your willing servant, wants to do our bidding. Yeah. Always wants to do what our conscious mind, which is the master, if you like, if we regard Sam, our subconscious mind, as our slave, the conscious mind then is the master. The master should be giving the orders to the slave. Yeah. There's one problem with that. The slave doesn't understand our language. If we're talking in words or instructions, Sam doesn't get it. Sam understands pictures and feelings. So our job as the master is to convert these words and instructions into pictures and feelings so that Sam can understand. When Sam gets that, now the law of attraction might work. People talk a lot about the law of attraction, and that's a load of rubbish and it doesn't work, and I've been sitting on this mountain top cross-legged for the last 3 months contemplating my navel and nothing has happened. Well, of course it's never going to happen whilst it's at an intellectual level. It needs to be absorbed into the subconscious and be part of your program. And that's what we can do. That's part of this thinking. So that's the first stage, really, is the thinking. And in terms of getting our subconscious mind on side, it's what I was talking to you a little about earlier. The subconscious beliefs need to be in alignment, in harmony, if you like, with our conscious goals. Yeah. As long as there's that disconnect between the two, we will always only behave in accordance with those dominant beliefs. So if those dominant beliefs are at a level lower than that, we can't aspire to achieving that unless we change these. So cause and effect, get the beliefs right, behavior will follow. Right. Yeah. So the thinking is the starting point. Then, of course, we go into the beliefs. Repeated thinking solidifies our beliefs. And again, with repeated beliefs, when we start instilling these, if you like, conditioning ourselves, remember the tape recorder, we're rewriting now, if you like. And this is it's a good example to use because we don't actually have to know what is on that tape to rewrite it. We can actually start instilling, we can say to ourselves, what beliefs do I believe I need to help me behave in a way that's going to achieve those goals? Now, if I'm in any doubt, I could look at a role model. I could say, well, there's someone who's getting the sort of results in their lives that I would like to be getting. What do they believe about themselves that causes them to behave this way, that gives them those results? So it's not a question of trying to clone someone else, but it's more getting clues, getting ideas of why they think the way they do. A lot of NLP is around that, modeling other people. And I have a lot of time for NLP techniques because I think some of them are very good. I do have a bit of difficulty in modeling others because I believe from a coaching perspective and certainly from a positive psychology perspective we should model ourselves. I think the technique is great, but we need to use it on ourselves because if we go back and we can reflect on successes that we've had in the past, those have created our current beliefs. They have all solidified, emphasized our current beliefs and are certainly playing a big role in our behavior at the moment. So we can, with the benefit of understanding how powerful the visualization is in this whole mix, because we use what we call, in deference to the chap who founded it, who was a German neurologist, Professor Johannes Schultz, way back in the early 1920s. He coined the phrase autogenic conditioning. So it's nothing new, it's been around since the early 1920s, and every sports psychologist worth their salt uses that or some sort of derivation of that. It's purely a creative visualization and emotionalization exercise. The emotionalization being the most important part of that. So the more we can sort of look at our beliefs and say, okay, these are the beliefs I'd like to cultivate now, I can start visualizing myself and emotionalizing myself with that behavior as a result of those beliefs. So that's the kind of, the autogenic conditioning is the kind of thinking we're trying to encourage people to develop as a success habit. So we've got the thinking, we've got the beliefs. The beliefs themselves would solidify into an attitude. And that attitude, again, Harvard University many years ago now did a study on their MBA program, and they wanted to know, and they surveyed, I think it was the Fortune 500 CEOs. They wanted to know what constituted success in their mind. They gave them a very comprehensive questionnaire. They came up with surprising statistics in the sense that these chief executive officers of the Fortune 500 found that your knowledge and your skills together only contributed 15% towards the success. Attitude contributed 85%. Amazing differences. And so they sort of said to the Harvard Business School, to what extent does your MBA curriculum follow that breakdown? And it was more or less reverse. They were spending 85% of their curriculum on knowledge and skills and only 15% on attitude, which caused them to change their thinking, obviously. So if we get the attitude right, and we've all heard about the benefits of a positive mental attitude, and I wouldn't want to decry that in any way, because I do think it's very important, but it's a link in the chain. It's not an end in itself. I mean, a positive attitude can, in certain circumstances, be delusional and can be very detrimental. If we're starting to look at life, through rose-colored glasses, and suddenly everything is wonderful, and we're believing that the fact that we're not getting any results here, but life is wonderful. What do we worry? Well, that's not going to, tap into your untapped potential. Mm-hmm. So yes, an attitude is an important link in the chain, but that's all it is. Positive attitude without positive action, I think you've got a problem.
Yeah.
And that's when it can lead to delusions. But in our sense, what we wanted to do is to say, okay, an attitude is like, if you like, it permeates. It's a disposition. It's a kind of permanent disposition. We would describe ourselves, I guess, as positive or negative on that spectrum. And so that would be, people would describe you as being generally an optimist or maybe a pessimist or whatever. And that would reflect your pervasive attitude. The attitude then comes into feelings. Remember, we've had thoughts, we've had thoughts, beliefs, attitude, now we're going into feelings. Now, the feelings, I believe, is what the NLP people refer to as your state. And that's, if you like, that's a snapshot at any one moment in time. We could be described as having a very positive attitude, yet just before we go into action, if we've received a phone call that our child has been injured in an accident, that's going to influence our fear. It doesn't mean that we're suddenly a negative attitude person. We're still having a positive attitude, but our feelings at that time, that state that we get into then influences our behavior. We are definitely going to behave in accordance with those feelings. So our job is to manage that state or that set of feelings. So the feelings then lead to the behavior. That's the results we take, the plan that we're following, that we're implementing. And of course our behavior leads to our results, which feed back into the thinking. So we've got thinking to start with, we've got the beliefs, we've got the attitude, we've got the feelings, we've got the behavior, and now we've got the results. Those are the 6 sort of stages. And they all feed back. Now if you see Sam as being inside that circumference, if you like, every one of those 6 impact on Sam, and there's a reciprocal effect as well. Sam has, because of the beliefs we've already programmed with Sam, it interprets whatever's the input and feeds back. So our job really is to say, okay, Sam, that's what I want. Make sure I've got very, very clear, and this is the law of attraction, right? This is what they failed to do on Oprah's show.
Yeah.
They should have done, but they didn't. They didn't emphasize the fact that we need to take some action. We need to engage the subconscious mind. So in my terminology, Sam, we would be having these autogenic conditioning sessions, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, focusing on our 1-year goals. So if you like, we're having a dialogue with Sam. Twice a day, a 20-minute dialogue with Sam, okay? And bearing in mind, Sam doesn't understand words or instructions, so we've got to create the pictures and we've got to create the feelings. That's what autogenic conditioning is all about. So we may have, in the process that we use, yes, we use affirmation cards. And again, same comments as for attitude. Affirmation cards are great. They've been around for 75, 80, maybe 100 years already. Affirmation cards on their own can be a complete act of delusion and can be detrimental to our progress. However, as a link in the chain, great. If we're using this as a left brain stimulus for the right brain, because the left brain would be the words and instructions, so we may have affirmation cards that state our 1-year goals as already having been achieved. That's important again, because Sam doesn't understand time. There's no past, there's no future. Sam only understands now. So we need to word our affirmations in present tense format. So we have an affirmation card, and on my program I encourage people to put the statement on the front and then on the back to have 3, maybe 2, 3 or 4, usually an average of 3, empowering beliefs related to that goal, so that we can be sure that whatever role we're working towards, and we encourage people to, if you're doing 20 minutes of autogenic conditioning, we encourage people to use as the content their 1-year goal already achieved in each of the 4 areas. When I talk about 4 areas, I really believe that in a coaching environment, that you want to try to encourage people to have a balanced lifestyle. The way I do that is suggest that what are your 4 major roles in your life? Now, for some it might be 5, might even be 7 in extreme cases. For others it might be 3. An average of 4 usually gives people the balance that they're looking for. So we invite people to say, what are the 4 major roles in your life? What is your 3-year vision? What would you like to be, do, or have in each of those areas within the next 3 years? That sets it up for the goal setting. Then we would break the 3-year vision down into 1-year goals and 90-day sub-goals around which we build a plan. But that's getting a little ahead of ourselves at the moment. If we stay with the 1-year goals, that's what we want to put into our autogenic conditioning sessions. So now we're coming into the sort of thinking and the belief side. We're doing the conditioning of Sam. We're ensuring that we're instilling in Sam the beliefs that are commensurate with our 1-year goals. So Sam is getting twice a day pictures. We're transporting ourselves into that picture, if you like, so that we can experience with as many senses as we can that end result. That's what the law of attraction didn't do on Oprah. They didn't emphasize sufficiently. So Sam is here saying, okay, and you know, what's going on here is, I want to be financially independent. I want to be, you know, this level of health. I want to have fantastic relationships. All good stuff. But Sam says, okay, well, that's what you want. Great, you know. When do you want it? You know, I'm talking about the now. Sam wants an instruction to say, this is who I am now. This is the end result. Sam needs to get that, and then in psychological terms, even in positive psychological terms, we would talk about this dissonance. There's a gap between what you're telling me. Sam is absorbing this and is saying, no, hang on a second. You're telling me you weigh, you know, 100 kilograms. You don't. Stand on the scale. You weigh 120 kilograms. My affirmation is I weigh 100 kilograms. With repetition and with the right pictures and feelings, if I keep projecting pictures of myself at 100 and the feelings of how that's going to be, then Sam eventually gets it. But if it's, I mean, that's why these diets don't work. You know, most of the diet, the programs out there are very, very good, nutritionally fantastic. Coupled with exercise programs and rest and meditation programs, they're great. What they lack, though, is they haven't adjusted Sam. Sam is still running on beliefs that say, you know, 120 kilograms is what you should be. That's your norm. That's the, in psychological terms again, that's homeostasis. So we've got to change the basic setting. We've got to recondition Sam to 100, not 120. And that comes about through repetition of the feelings predominantly. Yes, the pictures, but then the feelings. So that's the, if you like, the process of, that's the success process where we're helping coaching clients, if you like, to cultivate a winning mindset. It's basically saying in all of the areas of your life, if you know what you want, and I know it sounds simple, but you know, if we walked outside here now on the streets of London and we stopped 100 people and asked them what they wanted, they couldn't tell us. They wouldn't be, they'd dry up after 3 or 4 things. However, if we ask them what they do not want, then they'll be verbose. You know, they don't want poverty, they don't want deprivation, they don't want bad relationships, they don't want all of these things they can reel off. So we then say, okay, well, if we know what you don't want, we've got a fair idea of what you do want. If you don't want poverty, then you might like to have prosperity or abundance, or whatever it happens to be, a secure life. And then we get into the needs and things that will flesh that out. So if we can help people initially to focus on exactly what it is they want, and then show them how that if they move this from the intellectual level to the emotional level, if you like, from the conscious level to the subconscious level, we have got to get the right beliefs in place. Then we can start talking about, right, here's a business growth strategy. This is what we need to do. Only 3 ways to grow your business, bang, bang, bang. This is what you need to do. So then we can move on to that. But until we get that habit right, until they are, if you like, focused on the positive result, and they've got beliefs commensurate with that, then we've got a problem. Again, where positive psychology comes into the mix, where a lot of coaches out there, and until positive psychology came along, I think, we're still using that old, I mean, they were even then using psychological principles and techniques that work, but basically trying to find out what was wrong with that person. You know, why wasn't that person as successful as they said they wanted to be? There must be something wrong, you know, somewhere. And so the whole focus would be on, right, you've got weaknesses here. Let's focus in on those let's build up those weaknesses now. Now, positive psychology comes along and says, no, let's focus on strengths rather. Now, of course, that gels in. I mean, Butch Harmon, who was Tiger Woods' coach many, many years ago, and probably before even Marty Seligman's positive psychology came to the fore, he was asked once when interviewed, look, Tiger is #1 in the world at driving, he's #1 at the world at his short game, he's #1 in the world at putting, but he's 97 or whatever it happened to be in the world at bunker shots. Yet, you know, you don't seem to spend too much time. Shouldn't you be spending more time on getting him better at his bunker shots? And Butch Harmon said, you know, we prefer to focus on his strengths and manage his weaknesses. So we spend more time cultivating his strengths, and if we do that, he should stay out of the bunkers in most cases. But if he does go in there, we'll manage that. Okay, he won't be the best in that, but we don't believe in spending an inordinate amount of time trying to build up weaknesses when he's got strengths in other areas. We would prefer to focus on those strengths and manage those. And I thought that was a great sort of illustration of what positive psychology is all about. And from a coaching perspective, you know, if it changes entirely your own, the coaching mindset, because you're now no longer looking for what's wrong with this person. How can I help that person to fix what's wrong with them? That goes out the window. We don't need that. We need to look at what they've done and, okay, let's analyze your successes. If we're doing a SWOT analysis, you know, we would look at the strengths far more than the weaknesses. We're not trying to, if you like, ostrich-like bury our heads in the sand and not be aware of the weaknesses. We want to be aware of the weaknesses so that we can manage them, so that we can do something about them. But certainly not spending, you know, the bulk of our time. All that's going to happen there is that we're going to become much more stronger in those weaknesses. Whereas that time could have been spent actually strengthening our strengths. Far better, and I think far more quick to get people to where they want to be, certainly on the exponential growth curve.
Yeah.
And that's really what coaching should be all about,
Yeah.
getting people to, you know, live the sort of lives that they're looking for. And I mean that in a balanced way, because, okay, the majority of clients who come to me are largely chief executives, managing directors. They're successful business people already. I mean, that's why my company is called Top Achievers. That's our marketplace. We are dealing with top achievers. So a lot of them are looking for business solutions or business strategies, tactics to actually help them get there. And we look at the business, you know, as I said to you earlier, we have a personal development program, and then we have a business growth plan. And that business growth plan actually looks at 6 areas of their business. We look at their marketing, their sales, their client relationship management, their financial management, their business system, and their support team. And we would create strategy and tactics in all of those areas. But if we did that without doing anything about their condition, about their thought process, about getting Sam on their side, you know, I mean, you know, as a psychologist, it's well known in the psychological world, the majority of us are using at most 10% of our potential. Now, how do we then, if that's true, and you see this with people who, at the start of a coaching program, and you see them at the end of the coaching program, my goodness, you know, look at what they're doing. Here they were, just a couple of examples, took someone, £37,000, who's now earning £1.5 million a year. Okay, now that, okay, it didn't take overnight. It wasn't an instantaneous change, but just the use of the repetition, if you like, the spaced repetition. And I'm sure you must have come across the book The Outliers. Have you?
Yeah, I've heard it mentioned before. I haven't read it.
Yeah, okay. And there was another book, Talent is Overrated. Jeff Colvin brought that out some time ago. And basically the theme is the same, that, you know, these overnight successes, when you actually analyze them, or if you read the biographies, you'll find that they actually had an awful lot of preparation. Usually it's a 10-year period, 10,000 hours, 1,000 hours a year basically is what is traditionally thought now, with Malcolm Gladwell and Jeff Colvin talking about that same sort of thing. They cite, you know, Beethoven and Strauss. They spoke about the Beatles. You know, Beatles were suddenly an overnight success in whatever it was, 64 or 63, when they went to the States. But you look at their background. You know, the Beatles they had been playing for a number of years together, and Brian Epstein, their manager, got them a contract in Hamburg. And when they went to Hamburg, they had to play, I think it was at least 8 hours a day, or something. I mean, playing all day, or half the night and going through to the next morning. And so they only had a few songs that they were good at when they went there. And they had to get a repertoire now. They had to start, so they were doing other things and repeat it over and over and over. And they became so good at what yes, of course they loved music. There was the passion there, the desire. And that is something else that I feel quite strongly about on our program, because if we go back to what we were talking about earlier about 97% of these seminars and workshops and books don't work. I believe the main reason why it doesn't work is not because of any lack of ability on the part of these individuals, but I think they lack the emotional commitment.
Yeah.
Now, emotional commitment has 3 pillars in my book. Okay, this is my concoction, so you could play around with it. But I believe if you've got intention here and you've got implementation here, there's a huge gap. Now that bridge, if you like, which I would call emotional commitment, has these 3 pillars: desire, belief, focused action. And if you get the desire and the belief right, the focused action will then take place. The Beatles had the desire. They cultivated the belief that they could do whatever they wanted to do because they were, the spaced repetition helped them solidify that. And then that led to the focused action, so that they had the emotional commitment, if you like. The bridge between intention and implementation was there. With the majority of people, it stops at intention. You just look at New Year's resolutions, By the 3rd week of February, people are already saying, whoops, we slipped up. We haven't continued with that. So that's the essence, is the conditioning, and that we want to get people to, from the word go, to start thinking like a winner, to understand that no matter how successful they are at the moment, and bearing in mind the majority of people that I'm dealing with are successful in relative terms, but they got there by only using 10% of their present potential. So they're capable of far more, and that's what we want to try to get into, and they will tap into that. The key to using, or to discovering in the first instance, and then to using the other 90% of their untapped potential, is autogenic conditioning, is getting this dialogue going with Sam twice a day.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to put into schools.
Yeah.
So if you can start that ball rolling,
Yeah.
that'll be great.
Yeah.
That's what I want to try to do,
Yeah.
is to actually convince. And I guess it's convincing, I don't know, government maybe, but certainly the teaching authorities, and maybe, if parents were aware of how powerful that can be. And surely that's one of the reasons why we send our kids to school, is to give them the grounding. Yes, we give them knowledge, give them certain skills, but also the confidence, the belief to actually apply what they're learning.
Yeah.
And that's what this can do, that success process can do.
And when you work with your clients, do you use positive psychology assessments with them?
I do. I don't take specific assessment. I've used the VIA strengths, for example, with the 6 virtues and the 24 character strengths. I use that quite a bit. But it's not the only one. I think this varies from person to person, depending on their circumstances and what strengths they need for the different goals that they have. So I have up front a self-analysis questionnaire. Before they even come to the first coaching session, they will have completed a pretty comprehensive self-analysis questionnaire. That looks at their skills, their qualities, their interests, their values, their purpose. Now that starts telling me quite a bit about who they are and what their sort of mix of strengths are.
Yeah.
Also, from that we glean what their goals are. We also know what their past experiences are. So you've got a fairly good picture there of what this person's all about. Some of the exercises that we do on the program are designed to elicit strengths from different angles. So yes, we use the VIA strengths, and that becomes quite important. The values in action strength becomes quite important, especially when we pick up on their self-analysis questionnaire, where they've gone through a comprehensive list of positive values as well as negative values. And that might sound strange coming from a positive psychology coach, but I do believe that from a motivation point of view, quite often the initial impetus that is needed, it comes more from pain than it does from pleasure. We will always do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. So I liken it, if you like, it's like an analogy of a car on a hill. You won't start off very well anyway in 4th gear. You need to start off at first and then sort of change gear as you go up. And that, I believe, is what we would say with motivation, that we would start with the pain element. That if we can move away from that pain and now move towards the pleasure, that's going to be a double-edged sword. It's going to help us from a motivational point of view. So if we know what a person's negative values are, as well as their positive values, they may have positive values such as success, prosperity, adventure, kindness, contribution, and maybe certain sort of qualities in there as well, caring, love. They may be important values for them. So those are the positive ones, perhaps. But then we look at the negative ones and we say, what would you want to be moving away from? What do you not want in your life? And that's where we get back to the question I was talking about earlier. Is poverty? Is the lack of security? Is bad relationships? Is poor health? All of these things are pretty important that you want to move away from. So what are the values associated with that kind of negative picture? And can we build in, and that's what we would do once we've identified, because perhaps I should take you quickly through the model that I use. And that is basically, we get people, as I said earlier, to look at their purpose in life. Why are they here? If we've got an overriding why, I think it was Nietzsche who said that someone who has a strong enough why will always find the how.
Yeah.
And that's quite an important philosophy, I believe, when we come to helping our clients formulate a plan of action. And we say, look, that plan can change as often as need be. Again, where the law of attraction, I think, fell down is where people were expecting to just sit around and wait for some idea to come, or the sky's going to open up and this is your destiny. And now I go into action, but not until then. Whereas I believe very strongly that we should, with our conscious mind, yes, but if we're using autogenic conditioning and we're dialoguing with Sam and we're putting in the end result from Sam, we're not telling Sam how are we going to do this. We're actually saying to Sam, this is what we have already achieved and this is what it feels like. And Sam's going to say, well, I've got to make that happen. You haven't got that yet, so I've got to find ideas, find people, find situations where that can come about. Sam will then, through the law of attraction, actually get, but until Sam gets that picture and gets the feelings, it can't transmit the message to infinite intelligence or universal intelligence, whatever word you use, wherever thoughts come from, our subconscious mind is rather like a radio transmitting and receiving set. We are transmitting all the time. We're sending out messages, and we get back the reciprocal of what we're sending out. And so we need to be sure that whatever message we're sending out, the frequency, if you like, needs to be in harmony with exactly what we want, so that we can attract that to us. So what we're doing then, the law of attraction is basically saying, okay, Sam is going to ensure that my goal will come about. My plan to get there at the moment, with what I know at a conscious level, this is the best plan I can come up with at the moment. I'm going to go into action and give it my best shot, knowing that I could get an aha moment tomorrow morning. Sam could actually send me through an idea at 2 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'd suddenly wake up, gosh, that's what I've got to do. And I can change my plan. So my plan can vary, can change from day to day, if need be. But if we understand that the law of attraction doesn't say, okay, you've sown the seeds with Sam, now wait until Sam gives you the blueprint and then you can go into action. No, Sam will give you the ideas, provided you're going into action now and you're building a habit of being proactive. That's the third pillar of emotional commitment, focused action. Okay, what are we focusing on? Focusing on the best ideas that we have at the moment, consciously. We know they may well change once Sam gets the picture and feelings. So that's kind of the broad brush view of the success process and the business growth plan. And we marry those two together. And we go through things like goal setting and planning. We go through time management in a big way. Self-image is very important, so we go into that success process in more detail related to those two sort of core beliefs related to our confidence challenges and also our worthiness.
Yeah.
Do we feel worthy
Yeah.
of success? And that forms part of the self-image in a big way.
Yeah. What about positive interventions? Do you use specific positive psychology interventions?
Yeah, in fact, I wrote down, you mentioned that in your email. I put down here a few of them.
Yeah.
I put gratitude letters down. I mean, again, it depends on the situation. See, if we're getting people to try to get into a positive mindset, if you see that they are predominantly negative, they're unhappy in their lives, they're always pointing fingers, if you like. There's a blame culture, and that's pretty rife in this country. And I say that as an Englishman, I'm allowed to say that. I was born here, I'm an Englishman, so I'm allowed to say the English are a cynical bunch. And as a generalization, I don't deal with too many of them, fortunately, because I'm dealing with top achievers. But by and large, they are fairly negative. And so they'll always look at who they can blame or what's wrong with the situation, rather than, okay, well, what can we do to put this right? You know, how can we fix this? And so if you've got individuals like that, then you want them to kind of cultivate a positive mentality. And one of the ways to do that, and I believe it's part of a winner's makeup, is that they have this attitude of gratitude. And so we would suggest to individuals, look, just keep a journal of what's gone right. And every day for the next 21 to 28 days, we normally play safe and say 30 days, there's a month, and then do this for a month. Then you've got the habit. So for the next month, in your diary at the end of each day, write down 3 things that you are grateful for. And to start with, I mean, it could be simple things like a cup of coffee, or a compliment that someone gave you, whatever. It doesn't have to be a breaking news story. So they will write those down. When they start getting into the habit of doing that, then we suggest that they may choose to write some gratitude letters to members of their staff, to their friends, to their relatives. Are they getting into the habit now of looking for things to be grateful for? Getting into the appreciation side of things. So we do that, but again, with certain people, with many others that wouldn't be necessary. Optimistic thinking. Again, we're suggesting that if people are talking largely about their situation or their job, and they're saying, aspects of this I just don't enjoy at all, and I'm not very good at that, or whatever. We try to change their thinking by saying, okay, what is good about it? If we've got this big circle here of your job, if we put a smaller circle inside and say, okay, this is what you do enjoy, as opposed to, yes, it's against the background of a lot of what you don't enjoy, how can we actually expand that circle? Why do you enjoy what you enjoy? How are you getting that enjoyment? Is it because you're engaging your strengths? Now, and this is quite a big thing with the use of positive psychology, is that I've already alluded to the fact that we try to get people to cultivate these success habits. Now, the success habits need to be around the key activities which come from the plan of action. So if we've gone through this module, we know what their purpose in life is, we know what their values are, we know what their 3-year vision is in each one of their 4 roles. So they've got a 3-year vision, what do I want to be, do, or have in 4 roles of my life. We break that vision down into 1 year and 90-day sub-goals. We create a plan of action for the sub-goals. Now that plan of action lists all the activities. Now we're saying, right, now is the time we look very closely at your strengths. Okay, what are your 5 dominant strengths? If we know what your 5 dominant strengths are, plus we know what your 5 key activities are, and these would be the high revenue producing or high value enhancing ones. If we can marry those together, if we can put those together in a package, now we want to create success habits around that.
Yeah.
So this is where we would be looking to, if you like, the first habit we want them to cultivate is a winner's mindset, a winner's way of thinking, having this dialogue with Sam twice a day, putting into those dialogue sessions the pictures and the feelings of themselves, using their strengths on those activities and seeing their 1-year goal coming to fruition because of that. So we're trying to get a connection now, an emotional connection this is, between the end result, the desired end result, and what they're doing every day.
Yeah.
So here are my strengths, here are my key activities, I'm putting these together, I'm applying these every day, I've got a connection now because every day I know that it's moving me towards that.
Yeah.
So that would be another intervention where because once we know what their strengths are and their key activities, we have a form which is, it's like a grid, matching strengths to key activities. And we get people to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how effective they are currently in using this strength on that activity.
Yeah.
And then we build up a program. You know, this again comes out of the optimistic thinking, if you like. We build a program where we're saying, let's use one strength per week on all of your 5 key activities. Wherever you're, and once we've done the time management thing, we have what we call my ideal week. And we will have worked out that week in terms of how much planning time do I need, how much action time, how much leisure time. Now on the action time, we're suggesting they spend 80% of that time on their 5 key activities. So it's quite a big proportion of that week is devoted to those activities. So then we're going to say, okay, if I'm using, let's say I'm taking a strength of curiosity, for example, that's just one of the VIA strengths. How can I use curiosity on client meetings, if that's one of my key activities, client meetings, right? So let me explore how I can be more effective at applying curiosity to that. What sort of questions would I ask in that client interaction that would satisfy my curiosity, that would actually add more value to my client? So things like that. You take each one of those strengths, you say, right, for a week, I'm going to focus. This is taken out of Benjamin Franklin's book. You know, Benjamin Franklin used to, when he was regarded as, he was admired as, I think, America's most successful individual. And if you look at his autobiography, all he did was identify 13 strengths, and he used to focus 1 week each on each of those strengths. So, if you like, within a year, he did this on kind of 4 90-day periods. So 90 days is 13 weeks by and large. So for each week he'd focus on one strength. And on the next quarter, the next 90-day period, he would go back to square one and start on the first one again. So if you like, after a year, he will have focused for almost a month, 4 weeks certainly, on one strength. Yeah. And and that's what he said helped him to become who he was, to grow that.
And your clients, do they come up with the ideas themselves, or do you have to help them for how to use their strengths in new ways?
Well, yeah, I think we generally guide them. If they have got ideas, which some of them have, but I mean, I use quite a few different techniques. Have you come across the sentence completion exercise?
Yeah.
Okay, now I think it's Nathaniel Brandon who actually brought that to the fore. He's probably recognized in America as the foremost authority on self-image. And the sentence completion exercise is a very powerful tool, very simple tool, but a very powerful tool. And if you're putting strengths into that, or strengths married to key activities for that matter, you can create sentence stems, which I do with my clients. I give them a general one, firstly, to do for 4 weeks. And we get them to complete the sentence. You probably know how it works, but maybe people watching this interview may not. So let me just briefly explain it. You're given sentence stems, maybe 5 or 6 of them per week. And each sentence stem, your job every morning really is to complete that sentence as quickly as you can, between 6 and 10 repetitions. So for each of the 5 or 6 statements, for each of those, you complete 6 to 10 sentence steps. If you drive after 6, move on to the next one. Now, according to Nathaniel Brandon, we shouldn't be spending more than 12 minutes a day on that exercise. So it's very much, you're delving into Sam, if you like. You're trying to get the subconscious, because you want to write as quickly as possible. So whatever comes into your mind, it's a kind of mind dump, and you jot down. And at the end of that week, ideally, if you're doing Monday and you do all this, and Tuesday, you shouldn't look at Mondays until you've done Tuesdays, and then you could compare them. But you'll start to notice little changes, maybe slight changes per day. But at the end of the week, let's say you've done this Monday through Friday, on Saturday you would ask yourself, if any of what I have written this last week is true, then ... Now that will then start to have an impact on your plans of action. because you will have digested most of what Sam has had the opportunity. You may have done 1 or 2 sessions of autogenic conditioning where you've put in some of those completed sentences. You know, is that the truth? Does that represent who I am or who I want to be? So it's a very powerful exercise, and it will have an impact on your plan. So all of these things are part of the personal development program that we would put together. But they are interventions which, you know, from a positive psychology side, are very beneficial. I use a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, which again I think ties in quite nicely with positive psychology from a beliefs point of view. Specifically on that, Aaron Beck, have you come across Aaron Beck's work, and Albert Ellis? Albert Ellis is more responsible for rational emotive therapy, and if you recall, he talks about the ABC. He says it's as easy as ABC, because the way he put this across was that the majority of people think that they feel bad at the moment. Why? Well, that event caused me to feel bad. So an activating event actually caused you to feel bad? Yeah, that's right. And Albert Ellis would say, well, that's not strictly correct. The activating event A did not equal C, which the majority of people believe. Why is that girl upset? Well, because the boy jilted her. So the event was, the boy said, we're finished. The girl got upset because of the event. Is that right? Most people would say yes. And Albert Ellis says, well, not strictly, because it's easy as ABC. There's a B in between the A and the C. So the activating event caused her to trigger certain beliefs. It was her interpretation of that event that caused the consequence. So you could have had the same event with different consequences depending on the interpretation. In other words, depending on their belief system. So if the girl who had been jilted, if this had been her only boyfriend, let's say, from school, and she's been with him now for 4 or 5 years perhaps, and she thought they were going to get married and everything was hunky-dory, and now suddenly he's jilted her. What does she say? Well, she might, if she's got an inadequate self-image, she might feel that I'm useless. I've only ever had one boyfriend and I can't even keep him. And we were going to get married and we've been together for 3 or 4 years. I must be totally, of no use to anybody. How am I ever going to find someone else? That could be the reaction. Or if she had a different self-image, if she had positive beliefs about herself, she might have said, well, gosh, how lucky I am that I found out now. We were on the verge of getting married. I thought I loved this guy. I better look at, my definition or my values related to love. Gosh, I'm so lucky now. And because she's got the 2 basic beliefs again, right? She's got the confidence to face life's challenges, and she's worthy, she feels valued. That itself would give her the self-image that would have a different interpretation on that, and there could be a positive consequence to that. So that's the cognitive behavioral therapy. So we're using especially the belief side of it. I place a lot of emphasis on a person's belief system, especially with now the emphasis that Dr. Bruce Lipton has been putting on this, and how, I don't know whether I mentioned earlier, he does speak about the power of the placebo effect. I mean, most people know about the placebo effect. It's just a sugar-coated pill that your doctor gives you. Now, if you trust the doctor, whatever he's giving you is going to make you well. So your mind will then say, oh, well, we've got something. Sam's got the message now. This pill is going to make you well, so make you well. The nocebo effect he talks about as well. And, coming from as you know from the introduction, I spent most of my early days in Africa. And you see this rife in Africa where the nocebo effect is exactly the same as the placebo effect, except with negative consequences. So you're sowing a seed, but it's a negative seed in this case. So a witch doctor who's thrown the bones and maybe has gone through certain ritual ceremony, and they're beating the drums and they're creating all of this environment which, if you like, accentuates the power of the witch doctor. And the witch doctor points to some youth who's in, fantastic health and, wonderful condition. You're going to die in 3 days' time. Now, if that person, and because of the ritual and the tradition within the tribe, that person, if that goes into their mind, and this person who's got absolute authority, the witch doctor, has has sentenced me to that, has put a spell on me, I'm going to die in 3 days. The mind will ensure that that takes place. That's the power of our beliefs. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should start putting spells on people, but if we understand the psychology behind it and using the sort of principle there, that if I can cultivate the right beliefs, my goodness, I'm going to behave in accordance with those beliefs. And that's what I want to do. So we've got to get that winner's mindset up front before we can hope to change the behavior.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And you mentioned these different ways of working with people, with the interventions. How do you find out when to use what?
Yeah, well, sometimes we don't differentiate and we use quite a mixed bag. But again, it depends. I'm very much results oriented, so once they've decided on their plan of action, and once we know what their strengths are and we've married those to the key activities, the key now is to hold them accountable. They've got to put that plan into action. Now, do they have the right mindset at the moment? Well, they're cultivating that because they're going through every day. We've done the affirmation cards, if you like, got the beliefs on the back. They're rehearsing these, if you like, or imprinting them on their mind, their subconscious mind every day, twice a day. So they should be becoming much more proactive, much more capable of achieving those results. Now we want to monitor that, and we do this every week. Initially, we want to give them a connection between this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm getting. So the forms that we use, we have a variety of measurement tools. There's a KPI tool, key performance indicators, that we use. So we're monitoring actual against target for a whole 90-day period. The one that we get people to lock into to start with is what I call the weekly evaluation of activities and results. There we're looking at, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm getting. So what did I plan to do this week? And what result did I expect from doing that, from performing those activities? Did that materialize? And if it didn't, do I know why? Do I need to change what I'm doing in order to change what I'm getting? I think, again, if we talk about NLP, there's an old NLP saying, basically it says if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always got. That's no longer true, and I think the last few years have shown that. It's true if you qualify it by saying providing the situation, the environment, if you like, doesn't change. Yeah. But where it has changed over the last few years, because that is our general tendency. Sam, if you like, as powerful as Sam is, he or she or it is illogical, is irrational, but has all of this power. So if we acknowledge that and we understand that previously I wanted to achieve that, and this is what I did to achieve it. So I developed success habits. So doing that got me success. That action equals success. Now I've got this, Sam has got this in our subconscious mind. So it's perfectly natural to say, okay, if I want more success, let's do more of that. And it's disregarding the fact that the situation has now changed. We need to adapt. Life is a constant process of change anyway. And for us to feel that, well, because we were successful doing that then, we will continue to be successful doing it now. We won't. But that's the difficulty, is understanding the strength of that emotional connection to that habit. And it's so every 90 days, again, we're looking at an individual's goals and saying, what do I need to stop doing, to start doing, and to keep doing from a habit point of view? Because there may be, that's why we only plan for 90 days, because the way that technology changes, for example, the technological changes that have taken place over the last year, let's say, certainly over the last 2 to 3 years, would suggest that plans that we drew up 3 years ago, we wouldn't even contemplate putting those into action now, because technology is just different and we do things much more differently anyway. So I do feel that this is, again, it's a refocus. If you can get My job as a coach, I believe, is to take top achievers. If I can help them to be consistently focused, they will use their strengths to achieve their goals. They will do what is needed to get the habits, and once they've got the habits going, they're self-sustaining. They don't need me or anybody else anymore. They've found the formula. Now they're using their 90% of potential. They're on the exponential growth curve. They're away. And most of my clients are like that. Yes, I have some who've been with me for, well, I've been back in the UK now for 14 years. I've had some clients with me now for 14 years. But they like the sort of regular, I think they're more or less independent entrepreneurs. It's not that they haven't got it. I mean, the individual I was talking to you about earlier, who went from 37,000 to 1.5 million, we still see each other every 90 days. And it's just we use the feed-forward approach. I don't know whether you've heard Marshall Goldsmith in the States. He's a very well-known coach. I admire and respect his work a lot. And he has this concept of feed-forward, which I like a lot. Feedback is important, of course, in its own right, but feed-forward, I think, is much more appropriate to positive psychology, because you're visualizing and emotionalizing, if you adopt my autogenic conditioning, the end result. And you're seeing that such that you can bring it, into reality.
Yeah.
The more we can visualize, the more we can emotionalize that, then the more ideas we're going to get, the more focused we will be, the more composed and less anxious we will be in our actions. And that's all to do with autogenic conditioning.
Yeah.
I know I might be beating my gums quite a bit about that, but I really believe that is an important, with the majority of people. And, if you came to one of our seminars, I run 90-day seminars here in the centre of London for most of my clients, where they meet each other and they have the opportunity to sort of discuss ideas amongst themselves there. It's not just Peter Haddon, my terminology. They're able to review one another's goals. And we do that over every 90 days. We look back and say, let's review the successes, the disappointments, and the lessons learned. And then we preview the next 90 days in terms of, what it is we want and what changes need to be made based on our analysis of the last 90 days. Are there any changes needed? And we look at 4 pillars of the business, largely there. We look at client relationships, we look at their business system, we look at their support team, and we look at their personal habits. And generally speaking, the personal habits is the one where we focus most of the time on. Because that's the one where if you get that right, and the initial personal habit is the autogenic conditioning. Get the thinking right, everything else falls into place, or becomes much easier, let's say. And it's just, and it's such a simple technique. It's not as though, you're doing your doctorate and that, I don't know how many years you've been studying, and how many years you've got to go, but that's a big chunk of time to do that. I know I don't have my doctorate in positive psychology. Mine is in business administration, but I know what you go through to get there. Now, you'd think that, well, if you're asking someone to study for a doctorate, well, that's a pretty tall order. But if you're asking someone to have a dialogue with Sam, to get onto this 90% of untapped potential path, to get the exponential growth, to be successful, more effective in all of the areas of your life, and it takes 20 minutes twice a day, is that really difficult, And I think so many people overlook its value because it's such a simple technique.
Yeah.
And so when you come to these sort of seminars that we hold here, and when you're mixing with other people and you start talking, I say to you, what do you think about this autogenic conditioning, this crank Haddon's on about? Are you doing any of that, and has it made any difference, that sort of thing? And they talk amongst themselves, and you will find, because we have a brainstorming session at the end, and each group stands up and gives a summary of what they've learned during the day and what they intend to do for the next 90 days. And every time autogenic conditioning comes up, I'm reminding myself of how important autogenic conditioning is, because one or two of them always fall off the wagon. And surprisingly, they seem to interpret the technique as a business tool. And so they may go on holiday for 3 weeks and they won't do it. Doesn't make sense. You know, they've got all the time in the world, lying on the beach there, basking there. They've got all the time in the world to do it, but they don't do it because it's perceived as a business tool. So if they've been away for 3 weeks, you know, 3 to 4 weeks is long enough to develop a new habit. So they now come back and they've got the habit of not doing it.
Right. Yeah.
And then they start wondering why their performance is dipping, you know.
Yeah.
And they phone me for a reappraisal thing, and you know, we go back to basics. Are you doing this, that, and the other? Oh, well, I'm not really doing that as much as I should. Okay, let's do that. See what happens. You know,
Yeah.
let's measure that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I just believe, without over-egging the situation, I just believe if people can get that right, and if we could only get this into schools and show them, and I mean, that would, I'm not just suggesting that technique alone is what should be in schools, but the whole process of, you know, goal setting, and, well, not only goal setting, but actual goal attainment. There's a big difference. I think most people set goals. Very few people attain them. And that's, again, that difference between getting that emotional commitment. So we need to go beyond the intellectualizing of it to get into the subconscious mind, to get into the emotional side of things.
You were saying something about the intervention?
Yeah, it was just that from a positive psychology point of view, again, a very common intervention would be replaying negative experiences of the client, but this time with a positive outcome. You know, once they understand how powerful their subconscious mind is, and especially when they know the principle that the subconscious mind, Sam, as we've been talking about, cannot tell the difference between a real experience and one that is vividly imagined. Now that has enormous consequences for our conditioning and for this, you know, the blueprint that we want Sam to have. Because if we have failed in the past at certain goal attempts, certain plans haven't worked out the way they should have done, we can, in our autogenic conditioning sessions, replay those events, but this time with a much more positive outcome. What that does is it's interpreted by Sam as a real experience, and so it forms now part of this reconditioned blueprint. We're rewriting the tape, if you like.
Yeah.
Also, we would replay positive experiences. So where people have had successes, we would go back, analyze those experiences. Okay, so you achieved that, you know, it was a tremendous 75% increase in profitability within 3 months. That was fantastic. What caused that? Okay, you were directly responsible for that. You drove that through as the CEO. It was your sort of instigation. You created the plan, etc. What did you believe about yourself that caused that to take place? And so you're trying to analyze it from sort of, these are the beliefs that I had that caused me to behave that way, that caused that success to happen. Okay, so if we can trace that, now can you use those same beliefs in a different situation? And would that affect your behavior? If you had as much confidence in this area of your life as you do in that area of your life, would that help you to behave differently and more effectively?
Yeah.
So that's a pretty common intervention, really, to replay past successes, but also the disappointments. When you know, we go through a personal lifeline where people tell you, and again, it helps to get that background. We look at certain successful events in their lives, when they got married, or when they had their last child, or when they were elected president of the debating society, when they played rugby for the first team, whatever the event was that they felt really good about. Also negative events, maybe tragedies that they've experienced, or bad accidents, they lost a child here, or a good friend passed away, whatever those were, that may have had an impact on their emotions. We would put those in, and then we could, from that, say, okay, well, can you see how that event actually impacted on your success or your lack of success in that situation there? And we interpret that through the ABC. Look at your beliefs there. Because you had that belief system, it caused you to behave this way, which resulted in, unfortunately, failure.
Yeah.
So let's change that. And that's entirely capable of doing that.
Yeah. And do you share your knowledge with your clients or how do you only ask questions, or do you tell them something about?
Well, a bit of both, really. I have. What we try to do is our one-to-one sessions are of 2 hours duration each,
Yeah.
and between the sessions they read parts of my book. There are certain chapters in my book that I give them to read, so
Yeah.
that they're actually doing a lot of the theoretical preparation before we have our
Right,
session,
yes.
so that our 2 hours can be focused largely on the practical implementation of that theory.
Yeah.
So let's take time management as an example. They will have read my chapter on time management. They will know about the time management techniques. They will know that I talk about 90 days, dividing that into planning, action and leisure time. They will know about the 80-20 rule. They will know about my ideal week. They'll know about looking at their strengths and matching those to the 5 activities and where do I put these into my ideal week. So they will have all that theoretically.
Right.
And then we'll come to say, now let's look at your practical situation. Here's your plan of action. How are we going to operate this? If these are your key activities matched to your strengths in this area, how much time this week are you allocating for that? So we get them into the habit of weekly structuring their time,
Right.
or developing these new
Yeah,
habits.
yeah.
You know. So there's obviously a certain amount of discussion around the theory when we're face to face, but we try and minimize that by getting them to do most of their
Right.
studies outside of that.
Yeah. Okay. And what about flexibility? Do you change like existing models or concepts or theories? Do you adapt them to fit the clients?
We do indeed, yeah. I mean, flexibility is probably the key word in the program, because whilst I do have, as I said to you earlier, I've got this sort of personal development program, and I have a model for that, the 6-stage success process. I've got the business growth plan, I have a model for that as well. So we follow those as a guide, but each person who comes on board will have a different set of needs, a different set of values, a different set of motivations. So we need to take that into account. And so we very much mold the program to fit the individual rather than the other way around.
Right.
And it's important that we do that, and that people know up front that I don't have to change my personality to become successful here. You know, I can be successful by being my authentic self, and that's where they'll be most successful, when we can find out what is their authentic self. And that's again where Sam comes into the picture. Sam is aware of your authentic self.
And how do you change things, or how do you find out that you need to change things?
Well, we find out whether we need to change things by looking at their current results and measuring them against their planned results. So, as I said earlier, we have this sort of weekly evaluation of activities and results. So if they're not getting the results, then something has got to change.
Right.
You've probably come across if-then planning.
Yeah.
It's quite simple really. Basically says if is the situation. So if I want to lose 10 pounds in weight by a certain date for whatever reason, then I'd better do this, and that sort of suggests the plan. So if there's an if, the situation, then is what I need to do about it. Now if you can also then get the commitment, because most people understand that, most people buy into that. I mean, that's basically, okay, I know that if I want this, I've got to do that. Fine, no problem. However, if you ask them then, well, so you're going to do this in order to get that, okay? When are you going to do that, and where? So, you know, you might be asking me, well, when are you going to start your exercise program? And where? I've got to come up with something, so I might say, well, on Thursday afternoon, I'm going to go to the gym. And so the location, the gym. When? Thursday afternoon, 2 o'clock. I'm going to start my exercise program. I've got a personal trainer there, we're going to do this, that, and the other. So if they have thought through the where and the when, it invokes much more commitment to the if-then.
Yeah.
So I kind of use the analogy. I forget the lady's name now, but she was interviewed recently by Ben Dean, and I listened to her. She's got a book out all about goal setting, and she didn't actually say this phrase, but it was intimated in there. And I just used the sort of if, then, where, when. That's easy for people to sort of latch onto. And as a coach, you might want to sort of think about that if I'm dealing with a client now. Have I got the if-when plan sorted out, or sort of if-then? And if I have, are they committed to that plan sufficiently because they know when they're going to do whatever it is they're supposed to do and where they're going to do it? You know, that's going to help them to build this momentum of getting them on side. And if you then introduce the weekly reviews of successes in the form of that weekly evaluation of activities and results, if they're monitoring that or using the KPIs, using, you know, monitoring actual against target, and they're doing this every week and you're monitoring it as well, no place to hide. You want to reduce the number of places they can hide.
Yeah, yeah.
Initially, because you're doing them a huge favor by doing that. They may not welcome that to start with. In fact, there might be a certain amount of reluctance to have their performance measured. We do this with, we suggest that business people actually introduce within their team a weekly review of successes, and they call it that, weekly review of successes. And they go around a table. They actually, if you're chairing your support team's meeting now, you're asking each person to stand up and outline to the group what they intend achieving over the next week. What are your goals for the next week? Now, assuming everyone who's part of your support team knows what their role is and knows what their responsibilities are within the team. So they stand up, you invite them to stand up, tell everybody what goals you want to achieve this next week and how you're going to achieve them. Once they've done that, you then say, do you need any help from anybody around the table? You're giving them the option to cry for help. And you do that with everybody. Okay, thank you very much. The next person gets up and does the same thing. The next week, they stand up. Now, they do not want to have to stand up and say, sorry, I failed. Not in front of you, more importantly, in front of their peers. The peer pressure is pretty great. So you've got an accountability process there in place, which is kind of self-induced. So each week now you're saying, okay, how did you get on last week? Did you do what you said you were going to do? Did you achieve what you wanted to achieve? And if the answer to that is no, you can then kind of analyze that by saying, I mean, in a public forum, you wouldn't negatively criticize them. You take them away and do that on a one-to-one basis. But here you're looking for constructive. You're looking, you know, the emphasis is on successes. You want to acknowledge every person around there who stands up. We want to acknowledge they've had a successful week. So this person, if they didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve, you could say, well, if we go back a week ago, when we asked, or I asked you whether you wanted any help, and you said no, in retrospect, would it have helped if someone had been able to assist you? And they might say yes, or might say no, it was something that came out of the blue. I didn't know about it at that time, so you know I couldn't do anything about that. So we say, okay, well that's fine. Then that's not your fault. So you know we can't, we're not going to beat you up because of that. And so, what are your goals for next week? You know, and what do you intend doing for next week, and so on. Now, once that, for the first 3 weeks of doing that, there's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of reluctance. But as long as they, you know, this might be perceived as, oh, this is management's latest fad. It's just a tool to get more blood out of the stone, sort of thing. You know, that in this country, that would be the reaction with a lot of companies. After 3 weeks, though, once they see the benefits of this, it becomes quite enjoyable. They actually like getting that appreciation, that acknowledgement for their success, and they feel that they owe it to the others to actually do what they stood up and said they're going to do.
Yeah.
You know, you obviously have the option at the time of adjusting the goals when they say this is what I want to achieve this next week. If you feel, well, that's not consistent with where you should be aiming at, then you can have that discussion.
Yeah.
And again, it's usually best to do that on a one-to-one basis.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
It's all part of that accountability. You know, it's so important to get that accountability very tight.
Yeah.
I say on the group coaching program when we start the first session, because that runs over a 6-month period. We have 12 workshops, so fortnightly intervals over 6 months. And I say to them, if you only take two things away from this group coaching, these group coaching workshops. These are the two things. One, autogenic conditioning. Do that because that's going to help to develop you as the person. You know, if you want to grow your business exponentially, start with you. You are the most important person there. So get your mind right. Autogenic conditioning will do it. Second one is weekly reviews of successes. So the first one really is measuring, or if you're doing autogenic conditioning, you're implementing the personal development program. And the second one is you're monitoring the business growth plan with your activities, your goals, and your plans.
Yeah.
So it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that go into it, obviously, to get to that stage.
Yeah.
But essentially, if you're doing those two things, then you should be on the exponential growth curve.
Yeah. Yes. And what do you do to make your coaching effective? Now you talked about all these ways of working. Is there something special you do? Accountability, for instance? So,
accountability is, I feel that accountability is extremely important.
other things
I'm
you
not
do?
sure how long it was ago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, but the Association of Training and Development in the States, I think, did a survey. They were looking actually at the different effectiveness of different goal-setting techniques. And they found, perhaps unsurprisingly, that there was very little difference between the different techniques, that they were all successful to a degree. However, what they did find was where there was an accountability process or an accountability partner in place with that goal-setting technique, there was a 95% chance of hitting the goal as opposed to 43% without it.
Right.
Huge, astounding
Yeah.
differences there. So, I mean, that convinced me that, you know, I've got to focus in on accountability here because, hey, and when you do, you know, you see your clients, they will buy into it, they will get their support team doing it, it'll permeate the company. And there's a big, huge leverage then in people's productivity. So it's, but it does need, you know, I think you need to have the belief that there is going to be resistance, there will be reluctance, there will be reticence, whatever you want to call it, for the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But when they see, and it's your job, I believe, as the instigator of this, to ensure that it doesn't become a negative meeting. It is not there to find fault. It is purely there to acknowledge successes. We find fault on a one-to-one basis if that's necessary, but we wouldn't do that in a public environment.
No.
We would only, the whole rationale behind it is to grow the team. Again, using positive psychology to emphasize those strengths of that individual and collectively of the team.
Yeah. Another question I have is around working alliance. So how do you establish and maintain a good relationship with your clients, one-to-one or group?
It varies. On the one-to-one, we have, I spoke already about the weekly evaluational activities and results. We have a weekly email review of successes. So it's a similar situation to what I've just described, but this time it's on a one-to-one basis with themselves and myself. So I will email them every Friday, basically saying, I hope you've had a good week. Did you manage to? Bang, 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 bang. Whatever they've said they're going to do over this last week, whether it's seeing X number of people, whether it's a yield per meeting, whether it's getting so many referrals, whether it's creating a new marketing strategy, whatever it happens to be, I will have put that to them and they come back to me and answer that. That's on the one-to-one basis. Plus, we have telephone interventions at any time. They can pick up the phone at any time. If they're on a one-to-one coaching program that lasts for a full year, they are at liberty to phone me whenever they want to. If people do take, and I mean I've been doing this for 31 years now, people do not take advantage of that. I mean you'd think that maybe some of them do. The odd one or two maybe phones more than the others, but by and large they don't take unfair advantage of it. With the group coaching, we set up what I call success triads. That is 3 people. So normally a group coaching program, I only do it for a minimum of 9 people. and then it goes up in multiples of 3. So it's either 9, 12, 15. 15 is usually, sometimes we do 18, but usually 15 is the maximum we'd be looking for, because if you get to 18, it's best to do 2 lots of 9,
Yeah.
2 separate
Yeah.
groups of 9. Within that, we'd have these triads. Now, the leadership of the triad rotates every 2 months. So the group coaching lasts for, as I said earlier, it's 12 workshops spread over 6 months. So every 2 months there's a new leader of the triad. So each person gets to do the leader role for 2 months. Now what they do, they meet on a weekly basis. I have a telephone meeting with the leaders of the success triads just before the workshop, so that I'm able to prepare whatever I need to. If there's elements of the last workshop that I need to re-emphasize, or if there were different interpretations of the assignments, I need to actually make them aware again of what I was trying to get across. So that's pretty tight, and if they don't attend that they get penalised. Okay, they're required then to report, to send me in writing the minutes of their last triad meeting, and for us to have a telephone call to catch that up if need be. So they don't want to do that necessarily. So normally they're pretty good. So if we said, look, it's 5 o'clock on a Thursday, our workshop is going to be on Friday morning, so I'd like to have, and it's normally 1 hour with the leaders of the success triads, and we just go through what if your triad. How have your triad, how have they applied the assignments that were given? Were there any differences in interpretation about what we covered on that program? Were the exercises self-explanatory?
Yes.
So yeah, that's the accountability side.
And other ways of doing creating good relationships with the clients.
Well, I believe that it's essential to have a trust relationship with them, and that, trust is something that takes time to build up, but it means delivering on your promises.
Yeah.
Never promise to do something and don't do it. Always follow up on the promises, and over time people will see that. I was very fortunate here when I first started back in the UK. That was some 14 years ago now. That I was introduced to this company. Perhaps I shouldn't mention it on tape, but I mentioned it to you outside of that. And I'm privileged to have the top producers in that company as still being my clients. Now, word of mouth spreads very quickly, and the trust factor, the confidential nature of your meetings, the fact that you don't share whatever goes on in that interview situation or in that meeting with anybody else outside of that. I think people very quickly would find out if you did. And so that engenders a lot of respect, and I suppose a lot of my business has come from people talking about their experiences with me, and the fact that everything that we do is within these 4 walls.
Yeah.
So I think that trust is maybe the essential ingredient in a coach-client relationship, and not because I do also get called upon to do quite a number of talks or presentations within the same company, and it's important there not to disclose what's happened. A lot of the people know who I'm dealing with and know that they're at this level, so it would be easy and perhaps appropriate to actually say, well, now this individual here, John Smith, he was at this level and he did this, and now he's at that level, and wouldn't you like to do the same, and disclose that. We don't do that at all. On the group coaching one, I do share some of the figures with them. I do say that after 6 weeks of being on this program, the actual activity level went up by 70%. The yield per meeting went up by 91%. Now you put those two together and you can see what a difference that makes to their end result.
Yeah.
So I do PowerPoint presentations with that on there. So I do feedback certain figures generally, but never going anywhere near treading on the trust relationship. I think that's crucial to keep that going.
And you mentioned accountability several times. Are there other things you do to make your clients stay engaged in the process of going from intention to implementation?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all about that desire, belief, and focused action. So with the desire side, we have assignments. I mean, I have lots and lots of different assignments. So with the desire, we're basically saying, what we're doing with autogenic conditioning is we're starting a fire. That fire will go out if we don't pour fuel on it. The fuel that we're pouring on it is the desire, is the belief, which in turn will lead to the focused action. So it's basically using that analogy of the fire, saying, if I miss out, this is in cultivating the habit. You know, we ask them to do it for 30 days, twice a day. First thing in the morning, last thing at night, for 20 minutes. And the rationale behind that is to get into the alpha state. I mean, that would be well known to psychotherapists perhaps, but not to the general public. But basically the alpha state, often referred to as the trance state in psychotherapy, is where, at the moment we're in beta. Beta is a brainwave level of between 13 and 30 cycles per second. What we want to do is drop that level to 8 to 13, which is the alpha state. The alpha state is when, if you like, the gateway between your conscious and your subconscious is open. And you can achieve that through progressive relaxation. Now, I call it the trance state, and that might turn a lot of people off, you know, the actual terminology. Wow, I don't want to go there. This is sort of mind-bending stuff. What's this all about? You know, this is, he's going to hypnotize me. Well, in a sense, that is correct. But they are going to hypnotize themselves. My clients hypnotize themselves, if you like. And if you believe that, well, I don't want to go anywhere near that either, then you want to stop reading books then. You want to stop watching television. And every time you go to sleep at night, just before you fall asleep at night, you're going through alpha anyway. That's when, you know, you're calm, you're consciously still awake, but your subconscious is receiving information. So we can't not experience alpha. You know, every time you're watching engrossed in a TV program, or you're engrossed in a book that you're reading, you know, you're in the alpha state. There's nothing wrong with the alpha state. And also, it's a bit of a myth that hypnotists can or have the power to make you do what you don't want to do because they're directly suggesting to your subconscious mind these instructions. Your subconscious mind knows your authentic self. It is not going to do whatever is suggested. That isn't for your betterment. You know, our basic programming is for growth. Our basic program is for positive growth, in fact. So, you know, it's a bit of a myth that way. Anyway, getting back to your question, the desire, we would look at, one of the exercises we do is to say, can you come up with 5 reasons for each one of your 1-year goals? And so I would go through a question and answer process there so that they flesh this out, so that they know they've got 5 strong reasons now for each one of those 1-year goals. That becomes the content of their autogenic conditioning from a desire point of view. They're focusing now on that. What about the belief side? Do I believe that I'm worthy of getting there? Do I believe that I'm capable of getting there? Am I confident enough that I've got the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the money, the support team, whatever it might be? You know, do I have those beliefs on board? And if I don't, or if I doubt myself in any way, I need to change that. So that again is part of the fuel that we're putting on this fire. So what beliefs do I have on my affirmation cards? I've got certain 2 or 3 beliefs. They're related to each of the 1-year goals. Now I'm going to program myself with those beliefs. So I need to instill those. So it might be a general belief, such as, if it is to be, it is up to me. That's basically saying, okay, as someone who's taking charge of my life, I am responsible for the decision. Doesn't matter what happens to the economy, doesn't matter what happens to the ozone layer, whoever's in power in America or in UK or whatever, I am responsible. So if it is to be, it is up to me, I'm taking responsibility for my goals. It might be, I am always able to develop plans to achieve all of the goals that I set. I'm always able to achieve that to which I'm emotionally committed. Things like that, whatever the beliefs are. And again, it needs to be their words rather than my words. I suggest they paraphrase whatever I'm suggesting. I give them 2 pages of beliefs. They have a whole stack of empowering beliefs that they can choose from and say, okay, that one relates to me. If they're still struggling, we would actually go back, again, an exercise I referred to earlier, we would go back to analysing one of 3 successes, and we look at their most significant success and analyse the beliefs they had there and transfer those to this situation.
Right, yeah.
In most cases, they are easily transferable.
Yeah.
And if they've had that belief in place in that role, there's no reason why they can't have it in this role. And it's just a simple exercise to transfer that over. So it's not a difficult exercise to get people to see how they can program themselves, even though, programming or conditioning themselves, some people don't like the terminology there. But that's really, we are, you, me, we're all programmed 24 hours a day, whether we like it or not. I believe our job is to say, well, if I am programmed, if Sam is being programmed all the time with whatever's on TV or on the radio, in the newspapers, what we talk about, our colleagues, friends, siblings, etc., then shouldn't I take charge of that and put a filter in there, maybe make sure that I'm only going to focus on what's good and what isn't good. So again, it's a very simple phrase that we have a mantra, if you like. Keep your mind on what you want and off what you don't want. And people can sort of relate to that quite easily, because if I say to you right now, the last thing you must do is to think of a pink elephant. Do not think of a pink elephant. What's there in your mind right now? With ears flapping and everything. Pink elephant. If I don't want you to think of a pink elephant, I should suggest something like a white horse or something. Think of a white horse. Then you can't be thinking of a pink elephant. But if we understand that that's what's happening, that if a pink elephant comes to mind, in other words, if we start thinking about what we don't want, let's immediately switch it to the white horse, to what we do want. And that's perfectly capable. That's disciplined thinking. It may not happen immediately, but through autogenic conditioning, very quickly, within 21 to 28 days, you're able to be, to impose that filter and to become much more disciplined about the thoughts that you allow yourself to dwell on. It's not going to prevent negative thoughts coming in. As long as we're able to read and watch and things like that, we're going to see negativity all around us. But our choice is whether we dwell on it or not. And if we can use that switching mechanism, which is quite easy to do, you just catch yourself thinking, that falls into the category of something I don't want. This is what I do want in that same area, if you like, if it's financial or personal or relationship or whatever. If it's that area, right, this is what I do want in that area. So that's the thought I'm going to focus on. And then try to get feelings associated with that thought. And what we do as well, this is getting into a little bit more depth than perhaps you need, but for the autogenic conditioning, once we've got people clear about the thought process and getting into the feelings side of it. Remember I said the feelings are so important. So we create the picture, mentally transport ourselves into the picture and experience with as many feelings as we can. If we can hold those feelings for 17 seconds, now that doesn't sound long, but you try it. When next, if you do any meditation, try holding a thought, that picture, and putting yourself into that picture. Try experiencing that feeling and holding that feeling for 17 seconds. Very, very difficult. 2 or 3 okay, but 17, crumbs. When you can do that, and that's an exercise in sort of discipline again, when you can do that, then you're able, in any situation really, to actually conjure up the thought that feels best to you in that moment. If you're called upon, or you've been asked a tricky question, you're a presenter at a seminar and you've been asked a tricky question, suddenly how am I going to handle that? Well, if you need to, you get straight back into that feeling because you've conditioned yourself with the 17 seconds all the time. You're able to access that feeling immediately. And now you're in a confident mood. You don't mind saying, I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid, but I'll find out. It's a good question. I'll find that out. But you haven't lost any esteem yourself in doing that. And maybe if you've accessed that feeling, you've probably accessed the right answer anyway.
What do your clients say to this way of working, that you're doing it this way?
Some of them are quite skeptical up front. But I think the reason that I have, and again it sounds as though I'm being arrogant and bragging here, but I do have a very successful track record, and you know, with the companies that know me, they know that I get the results, and so people are prepared to kind of suspend their judgment and see, well, let's see what this guy's all about. Let's see if I'm going to buy into this. And I think in the 31 years that I've been doing this, I've only had one person who has actually wanted their money back, because it's a total financial guarantee on the one-to-one program. If they're not entirely satisfied, okay, we would monitor this really, because you might get some people who think, okay, well, I'll go on the program, I'm not going to do anything, but just get my money back at the end of it, and I'll just put together what I think is useful, myself. No, it has to be, they have to have applied it, and because we work together that closely, and I know I've got records every week of the meetings that we have, so that individual knows, and it's well documented, their progress. And in most cases, people who are applying it actually achieve. They get the exponential growth. The evidence is there. It's evidence-based coaching. So no, we don't. I don't get situations like that.
And what would you say are the most important mechanisms that make your coaching work?
Well, the most important one, you wouldn't be surprised to hear me say this, the most important one, I think, is getting them to take control of their thinking. And I know that sounds pretty simplistic, because what goes into a coaching program is so much more than that. But without that, all of the strategies, the tactics, the techniques, the principles that we do discuss in all of the different areas wouldn't be implemented to the degree that is necessary. I mean, you can get incremental growth quite easily just by using one or two of the techniques that we cover on the program. I'm not talking about that. People who come onto my programs expect exponential growth, and that's what I'm delivering. That's what I'm holding myself up to deliver. So you've got to be measured on your results. If you're not producing the results, then are you going to be in business for very long? If you get found out that you're a fraud, especially when you've got a company with 1,500 people in it, how can you show your face if you don't deliver? They would stop inviting me back.
What about your own development? How do you develop yourself?
Yeah, good question, because I think it is important that you continue developing, and I think I probably learn as much from my clients as they do from me. I'm not the guru. I'm not the font of wisdom. I've just taken over the last 31 years, and I mean I wrote my book, and I gave a lot of credit to a lot of people in that book. So people like Napoleon Hill, people like Maxwell Maltz, and Dale Carnegie, and Anthony Robbins, Joe Vitale, and Bob Proctor. All of these guys, have. I've done most of their courses, and I've enjoyed them, and I believe I've grown from them. I'd like to believe that I've taken the elements of most of those and put them into my own practical, applied coaching program. And the same with positive psychology. I wouldn't say that my program is 100% solely on positive psychology. It isn't. There's a lot of input. There's neuro-linguistic programming is in there. Rational emotive therapy is in there. CBT, as I said earlier, cognitive behavioral therapy, that's in there. So I think it's using techniques that are appropriate for the situation. It's really saying, what does this person's need? Am I very clear about what they need, and what would be the most appropriate tool or tools to use to help that person? So that's why flexibility, get back to an earlier question of yours, flexibility is key to this. We cannot say, okay, here's my program, you come along, we'll mold you to fit into this program. It's the other way. It's adapting the program to fit your situation. Because you're going to be the best you can be when you are your authentic self. You've got all the potential. You may only be, like all of us, as the psychologist is saying, using only 10% of it, But you've got the other untapped 90% if we can get to your authentic self. And we can get there via SAM.
Yeah. And to kind of sum it up, what advice would you give to others if other people are trying to learn to do positive psychology coaching? What would you suggest that they do?
Well, if they're serious about coaching, I think that the positive psychology route is going to be the way of the future. And I just believe that they can short circuit their development by getting into positive psychology early on, because otherwise they're going to learn by trial and error. They're going to learn through their own experience, and why not build on the experience? Psychology has a great reputation for remedial action from a pathological viewpoint. There's no reason why those same psychological techniques and principles cannot be applied to the positive side. I think Marty Seligman put it wonderfully well when, I need to get this right because it was some years ago now, but I think he said that psychology itself has focused on moving people from, say, -7 to -3 on the scale, whereas he believes that we should be focusing on people who are at +3 to get to +7. A different emphasis, but maybe using the same sort of techniques that help those people get there to help the positive ones get there.
Yeah.
And I subscribe to that fully. I mean, I think that it is all about strengths. You know, we can spend a lifetime working on weaknesses and improving incrementally. That's never going to give us exponential growth. If you focus on strengths, manage the weakness. Yes, of course, let's not, try to pretend they don't exist. If we've got weaknesses there, we need to do something about it. And if you can't delegate or systematize or eliminate or outsource some of what you're doing, then you've got to develop strengths in certain areas there. Yes, I would go on with that. But your time is far better spent saying, okay, these are my strengths, how can I use those to much greater effect? What value can I add to other people's lives by using these strengths more effectively?
Yeah.